Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Oldham County Board of Adjustments and Appeals to order. It is August the 21st, we're a little behind, 8:34 a.m. I'd like to also ask all parties if they could please turn off any noisemakers, double check your cell phones and pagers and all that type of thing. And then, so I know we've got several folks out here to speak, maybe some in opposition, some speaking for. And I would like to ask our secretary to swear everybody in at this time.
So you're saying anybody that wants to speak either for or against, if you would rise and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This morning we have only one case on the agenda, docket LG 23-001, and so I might ask that we be presented this case.
All right, Ryan Fisher, Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning and Development. So we have an application's been filed requesting a conditional use permit for warehouse suites, as well as a landscape buffer encroachment variance on property located at 2004-2005 Priest Drive in LaGrange. Property is zoned C3 Commercial District. So here is the parcel in question directly behind Tractor Supply, the area where the Freddies will be one day. Size is 2.26 acres, and once again, it's currently zoned C3 General Business District. No previous site history. As far as the case history goes, the applicant met with us back in June 21st, and had a pre-application meeting about kind of what his vision was and what he could do on the property. He formally applied, and then our case was posted to our Oldham County website on the 31st of July. We sent out adjoining property owner notices early August 4th, and then our public notice appeared in the Oldham Era on the 10th of August. So all parties were formally notified. Once again, here is the parcel in question, directly behind the existing Tractor Supply. Here's the current zoning on the property. As you can see, being C3, borders on both of these sides, residential. That's where we'll get into later the landscape buffer. So just note that this is the reason why there'll be that landscape buffer that's required on that residential portion of the property. Here's our future land use map showing that the future land use of these parcels being C3, commercial. So the applicant is proposing a 22,500 square foot development to be used as warehouse suites, contractors' equipment storage, and I'll let the applicant kind of really talk about what his vision is for the property in question. But really kind of both of those on this vacant 2.26 acre tract. Once again, property is currently zoned C3, which requires contractors' equipment storage as well as warehouse suites to obtain a conditional use permit per section 170-040. This is just a picture of, this is included in your staff packet, just showing the C3 General Business District, and both highlighted in yellow, the contractors' equipment storage, as well as the many warehouse self-storage facilities that this kind of falls between. So the proposed development, and you do have a full-size set of plans, hopefully with your packets, shows 18 1,250 square foot suites to be used as office, warehouse, or storage space. They'll have those roll-up bay doors, as well as parking out front for each individual suite. And here is a picture of that development. 8 suites over here on the Tractor Supply side, and then another 9 on the other side of the property. And just a zoomed in version of the suite showing a loading and unloading area, as well as 2 to 3 parking spots for each suite. So as far as landscaping goes, Division 300, our landscaping regulations requires that a perimeter landscape buffer area be applied along the boundaries of sites. The perimeter landscape buffer area is a landscaped strip and shall be provided where property abuts a property of a lesser density or zoning district, except for where commercial abuts commercial and industrial abuts industrial. And so there's no landscape buffer that's going to be required on that Tractor Supply side of the building, but on those residential zoning areas that I noted earlier, they are going to be required to have that landscape buffer, which number 5 there alludes to being a 15-foot landscape buffer is going to be required. So there is a small portion of this development, you'll see it on the next couple slides, that encroaches into this perimeter buffer area. So therefore, the applicants are actually requesting a landscape buffer area variance to allow 7.5 feet of encroachment into a small portion, just a 35-foot portion of that 15-foot landscape buffer area. So this is just showing, once again, that chart that's in your packet that's showing the 15 feet of landscape buffer area that's required where commercial is adjacent to residential. And they've met that in all areas. So here are on the green, the portions of that property that are going to be required to have that landscape buffer. They do have that noted on their plans. But you'll see this one little area right here that I believe they're going to need to use for a turnaround for vehicles encroaches into that buffer area. So the little yellow portion that just popped up on your screen is going to be that small little 35-foot section that they're requesting the variance on. So once again, 15 feet is the minimum size of the perimeter landscape buffer area, the proposed size being 7.5 feet in that small 35-foot cutout for a 7.5-foot variance. So the applicant, in conclusion, is requesting a conditional use permit for those warehouse suites on that property located on Priest Drive. Proposed conditions of approval. The conditional use permit approval shall only apply to the plans reviewed here today at this August 21st, 2023 Grange Board of Adjustments public hearing, and as well at the issuance of a construction permit, landscape and lighting plans shall also be approved from the applicant, and that usually does occur at that construction permit approval phase. And then, as always, the Board of Adjustments can amend, delete, add conditions of approval at this public hearing. And then, as far as the landscape buffer variance will be the other motion that we'll need to make, and that's the applicant's requesting that 7.5-foot perimeter landscape buffer variance from the 15-foot landscape buffer required on that property for that small 35-foot section, and the conditions of approval on that shall be the variance shall only apply to the plans reviewed today at this Grange Board of Adjustments hearing on August 21st. With that being said, that concludes everything I've got. In your packets, you will see the one email that I did receive. I do know that individual is here today to, I believe, speak in opposition. But that is in your packets as well. I just wanted to make a note of that. And that's the only phone call or anything that I received on this case. And that concludes my presentation.
Ryan, if I could point out, the handout that you've got doesn't have all the pages for the conditional use application. What we got in the mail before had it, but,
On your staff packet,
right.
it should have the conditional
doesn't
use
have page-
application, the first and the second page showing the justification.
It doesn't have, it has the first page of the conditional use permit, but it doesn't have page 2. It goes straight to the variance. It doesn't have anything in
It
here
doesn't?
about the about the conditional use. Or
All right.
Maybe it's just my packet?
So there's no page 2 on the justification?
No, page 2, page 3, page 4, or page 5. There's page, it goes straight to page 5.
But that's just for purposes of the members of the Board of Adjustments. That's not anything that wasn't advertised or whatever.
Yeah, but we'd like to have it if we're going to be basing our decisions based on the information and the guidance that's given to the members to how to make a motion.
Understood.
Does anybody else not have that? Is everybody's packet missing that? Because this is my originals that I run through the copier that come out, so
For whatever reason, it didn't come out that way.
must have ate them. If so, I can get some copies ran here while the applicant is speaking and bring them up to
Yeah,
you.
why don't you do that?
I will.
It's the page that talks about the potential motion for approval or denial.
Just those two.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for the staff? All righty, thank
All
you.
right.
This time I'd like to ask the applicant to come to the podium. And sir, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Sure. It's Cliff Ashburner with Dinsmore and Shoal, 101 South 5th Street, Louisville, 40202.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for your time this morning. I am here on behalf of Troy Corbin, who's the applicant. I have with me as well Phil Gambrell. So Phil's going to run through the plan in just a moment when we get to those slides. But as a preliminary matter, we are asking for a conditional use permit. Most of the time when a Board of Adjustments is looking at a conditional use permit application, you're trying to see what are the impacts. Most conditional uses are uses that are generally considered appropriate in a zone, but those that might require a second look. So this particular use, although it is listed as a conditional use, we think is less intense than many of the permitted uses that are allowed in the zone. So for instance, in the C3 zone, you have some uses that may generate more traffic, like retail establishments less than 100,000 square feet. We expect that this development would generate much less traffic than that. You also have some that could be noisier, like lumber yards that are allowed, or building materials and related trade shops that are allowed in the zone. But what we'll show you today is that these suites are really designed for smaller businesses. As was mentioned in the staff presentation, they're 1,250 square foot suites. And the site has been designed so that it is really it's kind of a small business operation. There's not room for an 18-wheeler to come back there and turn around or anything like that. So it's going to be served by smaller trucks and is adequately buffered. So if you look at your screen there, you can see the subject property that's got the pin in it. This is right behind Tractor Supply. One thing that I do just want to mention, we had a community meeting last week where most of the questions that came up. Uh-oh.
Well, it's just not on the screen, so
Okay.
you'll have to turn around and see it.
A fair amount of discussion was had about the buffer between the proposed buildings and the rear of these homes. So Tractor Supply has a fence, and the fence is proposed to continue all the way down the property line. So it's a 6-foot wooden privacy-style fence that'll run all the way down. Maybe I should wait, because I don't want you all to... Now it's just here.
You can't see it either?
No, I can see it now, and it's back up on the screen.
Just keep going.
Is it on the monitors now?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. Now it is.
Okay, excellent. So here's the subject property. You can see the Tractor Supply there. And then obviously you can see the neighborhood that's just to the south. Again, here's the subject property. Tractor Supply is here. This area, although it's zoned residential, is unoccupied. That is where we do have that one proposed encroachment. I should note that proposed encroachment is a small area, and it is behind a fence as well, so it's doubtful that anybody off-site is ever going to notice it. This is the zoning. As you can see, it's C3. Here's the land use designation that was contained in the comprehensive plan. This land has always been proposed for some kind of commercial use, and we actually think that the proposal that's before you today fits the site very well, and not just from its size, but also it's a relatively quiet, like I said, a relatively low traffic use compared to some of the other permitted uses in the C3 zone. And then here's the plan. I'd like to ask Phil Gambrell to come up and talk through the plan in the next couple of slides.
Morning, Mr. Gambro. Can you state your name and address?
Phil Gambrell, Prism Engineering, 2309 Waterston Trail, Suite 200, Louisville, Kentucky, 40299.
Thank you, sir.
Basically, what we have here, as Ryan described, is two buildings, but these buildings will be split into 1,250 square foot bays. The bays are designed so that, just a quick example, you're a independent plumber, and you work out of your home. You've overgrown what you're doing at home. You can come here. These suites, as you can see, the front doors here. I think we have a better view. Yeah. I'll have a storefront door coming in the front. Just inside of that will be a small office to your office requirements as a small business owner. There will be a restroom just behind the office, but the rest of the 2,500 square feet is the warehouse portion. And that would allow the independent contractor to store supplies, materials inside of that area, plus a secure area. They can raise the door, they can back their vehicle in. These vehicles carry lots of supplies on them, lots of expense if they get broken into. So this is a nice place for them to be able to put them. Here's a picture of what it would look like from on the inside. This is the small office, restroom, and then the rest, the warehouse areas. If we come back to here, as you can see, on the residential side of the property on both sides, full length, we have the 6-foot high fence that is required by the landscape requirements. And every 40 feet along that area, we will have planted a shade tree, a tree that will classify as the shade tree type A that will grow at maturity, the 40 to 60 foot range. The area we're requesting, the landscape buffer variance is right here. And basically, the only way I could get this particular suite's parking space for them to be able to back out and then leave. That's the sole purpose for that little encroachment there. And with that, I'll answer any questions. Oh, okay. One thing that usually comes up, drainage. Sorry about that. This entire site drains towards this front corner here, and just adjacent to this front corner, right where I'm pointing to with the pointer, that is a very large detention basin that was built when the Pristine Point commercial area was built. And it's designed and built large enough to handle all of the properties of Pristine Point. So the Tractor Supply, the new Freddy's, and anybody who builds on the other lots, their drainage will drain to that basin, and it's already there.
I have one question that comes about. Somewhere back in that area, and I can't tell if it's on this side or your side, there's a fire hydrant back there.
Yes.
So can you give me a rough idea where that fire hydrant is located from this plat?
Okay. It's along this, this is the proposed road that was going to go in and supply the 2 lots that were proposed. It's along that road. Right now, I don't have an exact location.
Okay.
It's the surveyor, it's being surveyed, but also along this road, there are already a couple catch basins that have been installed. And one of them we will be able to reuse, the other one we'll have to remove and relocate. But the fire hydrant, from what I could tell from the aerial view, it's going to be outside of our parking area.
Well, can you pull up the site plan? Because there's a water line shown on here. It's got to obviously be on the water line. It'd be a lot easier than guessing.
Oh, you don't have the site plan?
We'll go back to the staff report. Does the staff report have a site plan? There's a water line on the plan. It's got to be something
Oh,
on there.
yeah.
Yes.
Looks like that, yeah, water line comes right down, maybe through that dumpster garage.
It comes over and it comes right down through here. And if I believe it's out here, but if it's further down in the site where it interferes with our parking, we will relocate it outside of our parking area, obviously.
Okay.
Along those same lines, have you talked to LaGrange Utilities about the buildings being on top of the water line, or are you going to have to relocate it?
Yes, we're going to have to relocate it.
Is there any other questions from the board? There being,
Well, I got a bunch,
Go
but I
ahead,
don't know
sir.
if you want to just wait till all, or...
we can
I mean,
wait till the
You want to do it now?
end, or now, yeah.
Well, I just happened to notice this morning, I'm sorry, I didn't see it before, what's the purpose of the back doors on the building? And then it looks like there's a concrete pad between those back doors that is in the landscape buffer area. So I'm not sure why those doors are there and why those,
Well, the landscape buffer area is here. This is the sidewalk, it's basically an egress on the back that we may or may not put them in the buildings, but the condensing units would be right in this area between the building and the sidewalk. And it's for the ability to be able to access them. So,
well, for the benefit of the neighbors and not having anybody go back there for any just smoking cigarettes or whatever, I'm not sure whether there's a need for those doors, but I'll leave it at that for now. What about the back? You showed elevations of the front of the building. What about the back? What are the materials?
it'll be the same material as the front.
So that's a metal?
It's a metal horizontal siding.
Okay. And then, so you already kind of mentioned the mechanicals are back there, so the condensing units are in the back of the building?
Correct.
Okay.
And they will be hidden by the fence.
At any time, would any of these units, instead of one unit, is there a possibility that there would be an opening in between units to create a larger unit?
Yes, the initial construction will be of the shell. And then as the cells come in, there'll be the finish out inside. It could be a possibility that someone needs more than 1,250 square feet. They may take 2 units side by side. So the dividing wall in between them would not be put in.
Okay. I'm thinking of a similar structure over on Button Court that's like this. And I know that much of it is, just like you say, small business owners. that use that space for storage. They may have a little bit different setup as far as their parking, but I know that there is also like a gymnasium type thing in there that uses two units, and they have competitions there at times that generate a lot more folks. That's why I was asking, would that be a possibility that something like that could come in to your facility?
This is Troy Corbin. He's the developer. I'll let him.
All righty.
Good morning. Troy Corbin, 7110 Autumn Bent Way, Crestwood, Kentucky, 40014. I appreciate everybody's time this morning.
Yes, sir.
Yes, our intention is to really vet the potential tenants and find which tenants are going to fit with the suites for their particular use. There are a lot of gymnasiums, CrossFit gyms, boxing gyms, et cetera, that may want to use these spaces because they are open, clear span. Unfortunately, their parking needs sometimes will eclipse what's really available, right? So it comes down to the vetting process on who we want to put into the suites that won't overpopulate the parking spaces and create a burden on the other tenants.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think that over there they have a problem with the, let's say, regular classes that come in. There's plenty of parking there, but at times when which is CrossFit-like.
Yeah, but when the
they'll have
competitions happen, there's
large competitions.
100+ cars that come in, and there's
they'll
nowhere
be
to park,
parked
yeah.
up and down the highways
Yep.
and everything else to get over there. So that's all my question involved.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
If I can just say just a couple other things about this. One, you notice that there aren't any loading docks. I know that some concerns are about the size of the trucks that are going to come in and things like that. So because there aren't loading docks, you're not going to have large trucks that are going to be able to back up to a warehouse the way that you would find in another area. There's no sunken dock or anything like that. So these units are going to be served, if things are coming off a truck, it's going to have to be either a truck with a lift or something that people can pull materials out of. As Phil mentioned as well, the garages are kind of important. If you know anybody in a skilled trade, my older brother's a carpenter. He's driving around with his life on his truck, and so keeping that truck secure somewhere is really important to him. And so I think having the ability to pull in and park and be in a secure area is something that's really important. But again, this is designed to be kind of for small business people, smaller business suites. As you notice, Mr. Chairman, that was a good point about the gyms. There are only so many parking spaces on the development plan. And as Troy said, you don't want to have one tenant, even if that tenant takes up 2,500 square feet, totally monopolize the parking. So you need to fairly allocate that among the units. As I said before, I think this is an oddly shaped site. It is behind Tractor Supply, and the proposed use here is one that should be a little bit more compatible with the neighborhood around it than some of the other permitted uses in the zoning district. So we would ask for your favorable ruling on the conditional use permit, and I'll wait until the opposition has spoken to wrap up.
I do have one other, maybe two questions. The entrance coming in
Yes.
to this, it's not going to be gated in any way, is it?
No.
Okay,
We covered that the other day.
go ahead.
We had considered a gate, but delivery from UPS or FedEx or even Amazon would create a bit of a hassle for the proposed tenants in these suites. Also would create a potential failure point for these people to access the site. If that gate were to fail, they may be locked out of the site until it were repaired. So right now it's going to be open. The goal is to have it cameraed and have the whole site cameraed from a security perspective, but there will be no gate that locks off the site.
And would you say that the majority of the time, the hours of operation in there would be, say, I don't know, 9 to 5, 9 to 6
Yeah,
type thing?
I will say it'll probably be a little earlier. Most of the contractors we deal with, they like to come in early. So maybe a 7 to 6, 7 to 7 type operation as people come in and kind of assemble their crews and go about their day and then come back to the shop at night, secure their vehicles, and head home to their families. But definitely, we believe majority of the time will be during the workday.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
I got one question. I asked about the facade on the back of the building. Are you going to have lights back there?
There may be low wattage security lights for the cameras and whatnot, but from a lighting perspective, the design is to really focus the lighting on the parking areas in the front by our lighting designer.
Will it have, are you intending to have just wall packs on the building, or are you going to have light poles?
Right now, the plan is on the front of the building to have wall packs, although we're evaluating certain light poles that would have directional light beams down to the parking lots.
This might be an engineering question, but could you go over the side setback, how that's calculated, and whether that is included with the landscape buffer or it's in addition to?
It's not in addition to. You have, in some instances, your landscape buffer is larger than your building setback. So in that case, you're obviously then restricted to, limited by the landscape buffer. But in this case, the landscape buffer is 15 feet and the setback is 25. So
Is that based on, because it says here there's no setback for C3.
well, that
But
is
that's-
on
but you take
this
it
line
from
here.
The R2?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's adjoining, the adjoining
When,
zoning.
when you adjoin similar zoning, for example, the C3 that we have and the C3 that Tractor Supply has, there is not a buffer or a setback required. It's a zero lot line. But when you are adjacent to a residential, you have to adopt the setback for the residential. So
Okay,
we have a
thank you.
25-foot setback because of that.
Okay, thank you.
Is it your intention to sell these to individuals, or are these going to be leased? Are you going to be the owner and lease them out, rent them out, or whatever?
So the intention is not to condo these out. The intention right now is to lease these spaces to small businesses, like Phil said, that would be growing out of their homes or maybe trying to evacuate Jefferson County and come out to LaGrange to build an office. So right now, they'll just be rented spaces.
For minimum of a year? Or?
Minimum of 1 year, but preferably 3 to 5 year leases for these businesses.
All right, so do we have anybody that would like to speak in favor of this application at this time? All right, there being none, is there anybody that would like to speak in opposition to this? Sir, if you could come forward and state your name and address, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Derek McMahon. My address is 2020 Cherry Creek Road, LaGrange, Kentucky 40031. I am one of the adjoining property owners.
All righty. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Well, I'm here in opposition to the conditional use permit that's being applied for today for the simple reason that I believe this use of the land will create a considerable nuisance for the adjoining property owners. Contrary to the assertions of counsel for the applicant, warehouses are a considerable nuisance. I have some experience with this due to our existing proximity to Tractor Supply. The good news about Tractor Supply is that it is not primarily a warehousing operation. It's primarily a retail store. Pretty quiet. People come in, they take merchandise, they exchange money, they go home. But about 10% of Tractor Supply's operation is receiving trucks, taking shipments, opening and closing bay doors, opening and closing the trucks, moving forklifts, moving around stock, and that portion of the enterprise creates a significant amount of noise. The metal on metal impact noise, you know, dropping pallets, that kind of stuff, it can be heard clearly inside the home. You know, Tractor Supply is a pretty reasonable neighbor in terms of hours of operation. They tend to wrap up around 8 in the evening. They tend to not get started until about 7 in the morning. But when there's any exception to that, so when they were doing some additional renovation at one point in the year, when they have a late delivery or an early delivery, our schedule is their schedule. So if the trucks show up at 4 in the morning, we wake up at 4 in the morning. You know, we have fans and white noise machines at maximum volume. Doesn't matter. That kind of noise will wake you up. If they have a late delivery, if the last delivery is 11 o'clock, we go to sleep at 11:05. There's just no way around it when you're in that kind of proximity to that kind of operation. And this proposal is going to be 100% a warehousing operation on really a larger scale. So instead of one tenant, we're now talking about 18 prospective tenants with 24-hour access to the facility. So they can come and go as they please, load and unload. The more enterprising and hardworking the tenant, the greater a nuisance they will be to the local community. The fact that there is no gate securing the premises is additionally a concern. I would say probably a half dozen times a year, we have trespassers in the back lot at Tractor Supply, just revving the engines of their vehicles, having a party, drinking, whatever the case is. If they're allowed to make it further back into the facility, they are going to do that. That will mean that they're more hidden from the street, more hidden from law enforcement, so that's really an opportunity for them. If there is low light, you know, if there's high lighting on the property, that's a nuisance in and of itself. If there's low lighting, it invites nefarious activity. This particular site of land is not a good use for a conditional permit type activity. It is small. The proposed activity is going to fill every square inch of that space, which is a part of why the variance is being requested. There's no natural buffer, landscape or otherwise, between the site and the adjoining residential land. So really, we are going to have exactly what you see here, a single 6-foot fence, small trees spaced at 40 feet. There is really going to be no visual or auditory insulation whatsoever. We are going to absolutely be sharing our day-to-day life with this activity, and we will be completely beholden to the scheduling and choices of the tenants. So we really have no idea what we're getting into here, but I am extremely confident that it is going to disturb the peaceful enjoyment of the homes in that area and certainly going to negatively affect their property values. So it's clear to me, based on the questions that you're all asking, that you have the best interests of the LaGrange homeowners and residents at heart. I really appreciate that. And I ask you to just think very carefully about the impacts that are going to occur from this development on people like me. I like my house, I like my neighborhood, I don't want to move, but it's hard to imagine this being installed and not, or being able to continue living there. So I ask that you give it careful consideration and please reject this application for the conditional use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Was there someone else? Come forward, please. If you could, sir, state your name and your address.
Alan Sawyer, 2018 Cherry Creek Road, LaGrange.
All righty. Might I ask you, at what point did you come into the court? Were you sworn in earlier?
No.
Okay. If you could, please raise your right hand, and the secretary will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I was on that buffered zone where they was going back further on the buffer zone. I was, you know, that's right in behind our property,
What was your last name, sir?
Sawyer.
All righty.
It's on the other side of the development, so there's a long, narrow strip of property on the other side of this development. Yeah, Cliff, you're going to show them. Use the mouse. Cliff, use the mouse to,
No, yeah, this is where the Tractor Supply.
You're right here, yeah, that's Tractor Supply. This right here is where the encroachment is. Everything back here is according to the regs.
The 35.
Yeah.
What about the trees? They said, when we was at the meeting the other day, they said it was 4 feet on the trees, and then they said it's 40 feet today.
40 feet on center.
No, 40 feet apart, trees.
Yeah, when I
That's,
say on center, what that means is that's how far apart the trees will be.
That ain't gonna be no trees.
That's what the landscape code requires.
there are other landscape requirements. They were just pointing out the shade trees that they were going to plant.
Yeah. Okay. It's just, that it was coming back, and then the roof of those buildings slants back towards our property for the drainage.
I'll have to ask the engineer if that's the case. I'm not sure.
I believe he had some questions about drainage coming off the rear of the roofs,
The roofs.
if they were slanted towards the rear.
Yes, they'll.
Well,
Could you come up front, sir? Thank you.
Yes, the roofs it'll be a flat roof that slants to the back. It will be picked up along the back with a gutter. It will go down into a roof drain, underground roof drain, which will come around and connect into the storm sewer that will go over to the detention basin. So it's not going to just run off the back of the building onto the ground. It'll go into a gutter across the back, and then it'll go underground out to the
Okay,
detention
I want
basin.
to ask you about that, where them, behind Tractor Supply, where those buildings are at, how far close to the property line is that? When they, they're going this way?
This building here,
Yes.
okay, well, this dashed line right here
Yes.
represents the building limit
Yes.
offset, and that is 25 feet from the property line.
Okay. And so it's no, an easement on, it's on this other side that they got an easement back, you said?
Yes, it's this piece right here
Oh, okay.
where they're wanting to back out of this parking space. It's just a spot big enough to allow a car to
Yeah,
back
right over
in
here.
and come out. Yes, sir.
That's where I was confusing
Oh,
the
okay.
situation. Okay.
That answer your question,
I
sir?
think that answers it and everything, and we would consider a 8-foot fence if they would, to make it more, if it does go through, it would be a lot more for the neighbors if you did. I mean, I go with the other neighbor, but, that's another thing that, in the open gate where they can come in anytime they want to, it makes it more of a nuisance too. Okay.
All righty, sir. All
Thank you
right.
very
I
much.
appreciate your comments. Thanks.
I have a question based on his last comment about an 8-foot fence of Phil. I went back and looked at the property. All the houses are actually uphill from this site. It's fairly flat. And a 6-foot fence really doesn't do you anything other than security. So would it be reasonable and feasible? I'm not sure an 8-foot fence would block all that much more visibility, but would the applicant consider an 8-foot fence?
We were basically continuing the Tractor Supply fence in height and in type, but, I mean, I don't know, would you consider an 8-foot?
I think right now the intention is to
Come to
continue.
the microphone.
Right now, the intention is to continue that view from Tractor Supply over. If you look at how the trees have matured on the Tractor Supply lot, it creates this beautiful buffer of green space plus that wooden fence. You know, the benefit of that wooden fence is it does absorb a lot of noise, being that it's wood versus a metal fence that would kind of reverberate the noise. Right now, the evaluation is based on a 6-foot fence that will run that entire length of the property. You know, we can consider it, but right now we're trying to fit within the requirements of the landscape buffer.
Well, a neighbor asked for something more, so before the end of this meeting, you ought to think about whether your answer is yes
Yeah,
or
we
no.
can evaluate it from a construction cost perspective, all that.
Well, I think your answer needs to be yes or no for the purpose of this meeting.
What he's saying is, a neighbor in opposition has requested an 8-foot fence. So before they make their decision today, they need to know whether you would or would not do an 8-foot fence.
And that would be part of the conditional use permit.
Yes.
It'll be part of the conditions of approval, right?
From your recommendation.
You can
Yeah, I
take some
think we
time,
can-
you
we
can take
would-
some time to think about it.
We
You
would approve an 8-foot fence on that. Obviously, it would look different than what is currently installed on the Tractor Supply, but we could add that to the building project.
Okay.
One question I might have on that, I know within the city, as far as an 8-foot privacy fence, I don't know if the county's got anything on
Well,
it or not.
It's a weird number, it's 7 feet, but if you approve an 8-foot fence, you're essentially approving a waiver of that
Okay,
maximum height.
okay. All right. Oh, come forward, ma'am.
I wasn't sworn in either, so.
Yes.
We weren't sworn in.
Oh, all righty. If you could raise your right hands, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Could you state your name and address, please?
Chandra Crawley, 2102 Cherry Creek Road, LaGrange, Kentucky.
All righty,
Sean Crawley, 2102 Cherry Creek Road, LaGrange, Kentucky.
all righty. Go ahead.
I don't think I could say much more than Derek did as far as all of the points that he covered. I think he did a great job, but I can't help but think that the more people that oppose and come up here and say that to you, that maybe it'll help. It sounds like a terrible thing behind us. I know they compared and said something about it's better than a lumber yard. I don't think there's room for a lumber yard behind there, so I don't think that's what's going to be coming in. But again, the noise that even though we're not anywhere near Tractor Supply in the whole scheme of things, there is a lot of noise. And the fact that this would have 24-hour access, again, I think that, you know, if somebody wants to come in the middle of the night and do what they want, they're renting the property, they think it's their right, so. And I hadn't given much thought to the fact about soliciting, or not soliciting, but people coming back and using it in a way that's not appropriate in the evenings without it being gated. I see that as being a big problem, especially with all the thievery and all the people that have been coming around, you know, breaking in cars and everything else that's happening constantly in our neighborhood. So again, I just can't help but think that the more people that oppose it, the better. I wish we had more neighbors that had shown up.
Yeah, I agree. And from our property line to this building, it's like 25 feet. So I don't care if you have a 6-foot fence or you have your trees 40 feet apart, you're not going to miss this building. I mean, it's going to be right in our backyard. I mean, right now, I mean, granted, I know something's going to be there one day.
Right.
But Tractor Supply is not 25 feet behind the other buildings. Tractor Supply is
space.
hundreds of feet. I mean, 25 feet right in our backyard is going to be an eyesore and a nuisance, and then the noise. like
And
you
the
said.
property value. I can't
And the
imagine
property value, I
what
mean,
this is going to do to the property
Trying to
values.
sell our home down the road, which we're not going to live there forever, is going to be a nightmare. Who's going to want to live behind that? You know, yeah, we're not happy about it. And like I say, the noise, because if, you know, let's say if it was a woodworker or something, I'm a trim carpenter. I mean, I could see the use of one of these in a sense, but let's say if I was doing a project and I was building cabinets or something, you know, you're going to work late one night. You might work 2 o'clock, try to meet a schedule. I don't care if they're a metal building, they're not going to be that well insulated. And saws and sanders and all that stuff right in your backyard is going to be a nuisance. I've tried to do it in my garage with the garage door down, and you can hear it up the street. So I'm not the neighbor that's going to do that in my home. So,
and I surely don't want it in our backyard.
And the visual is gonna be
Yeah,
hideous.
it's gonna be a nightmare.
Right, right.
When all we've looked at is beautiful trees, and
Yeah.
40 foot apart is not,
That's not.
I don't see a
for
point in that. I mean, in maturity, sure, 20, 30 years down the road, they might have some kind of benefit, but
Right.
some
Right.
tree that they plant 40 feet apart isn't gonna, that's not gonna help.
So I guess that's all we can say. Like I said, he said the best part of it all.
Right. Thank you. for
Thank
your
you.
time.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. I can see some concern with, noise and so forth. However, there's not going to be any semi-tractor trailers able to access any of this setup back there. You don't have traditional loading docks. your common road tractor, a 53-foot, along with, 210-inch wheelbase cab, like you may see at Tractor Supply. They're not going to be accessing this area to load or unload. It's going to be mainly, pickup trucks with trailers, maybe some equipment on the back of it, or small box trucks that are a whole lot less noisy than your semis that would be coming into Tractor Supply. I understand what you're saying. We've had talk about an 8-foot fence being put in, recommendation on the homeowner. The builder has taken that to light and may consider that. Are there any other questions, Mr. Early, Mr. Pierce, or anybody else?
Well, I mean, you just need to give them the rebuttal options, the closing statements and all
Right,
that.
Well, they're still I got a couple of
But,
questions.
Okay, but yeah, there's questions at this point before we get into the discussion.
I've got a question. What are the hours of construction? Hours of construction, if this were to be approved, because in conditional use applications, we can put conditions upon whatever you feel is important to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the adjoining property owners, so.
Okay. Getting into the logistics of constructing a building at this point in the process is a little bit unusual, but for the most part, it'll be a traditional construction schedule, meaning that the work will be done between, 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock. The day that there are 2 large slabs that'll have to be poured. They'll be concrete. So on that day, those hours will probably go a little longer, just because the amount of concrete that's required to be poured there. But I don't have the starting time. I mean, if you do this in the fall, it's unlikely you're going to be pouring in the dark. If you were to try to pour concrete on Friday, there are going to be some jobs that are getting going at 4 in the morning, just based on the heat. But I don't think that would be the case here.
Again, you heard the neighbors saying that at Tractor Supply, if they get a delivery at 11 o'clock, that's when they go to bed because they can hear it. So the reason I'm
Right.
asking this question is so that the neighbors who are immediately affected by this have some expectation on when the
Well-
noise might be, so.
Sure, and I understand that, which is kind of why is it appropriate to move into rebuttal now, or are we just still in questions?
Not yet.
Okay, all right.
I'm still trying to establish as a potential binding, a condition of approval rather, whether or not there's a limitation on hours of construction.
I mean, I don't know what's being suggested, so I can't really
Well, you
respond to
said,
that.
I already wrote down, you said 8 AM to 5 PM, understanding that it could be
Typical construction
later,
time, yeah.
but, is that what you're gonna go with? I mean, 8 to 6, give me something.
7 to 6. 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
With exception.
Yeah, with the, Phil was going to mention with the exception for the pouring of the concrete.
With exception of the days that the concrete's being poured. Because there is no way the concrete can be poured, cured, troweled, and saw cut within that time frame. They will probably get started pouring before daybreak, and they won't be finished with the curing and troweling process until after dark. It's just, that is the nature of that concrete business. So if we need to agree to a time frame for normal construction, but there needs to be an exception in the binding element for the concrete pours.
And how long does it take to make those 2 pours? Are you talking 2 days or
No,
1 day?
well, it'll be 2 different times. They won't pour both slabs in one day. And those slabs, as large as they are, will be probably a 10-hour process.
On each slab?
Yeah, to pour them, to cure them, trowel them, and then saw cut them.
If this were approved, you expect it to be poured roughly when? You mentioned October?
Yeah, we're hoping to be pouring the concrete in November.
Okay.
I think that's all I have.
Okay. So any other discussion at this time or questions for the applicant? There being none, we need to go into a final statement,
Well, rebuttal.
correct? Or
Rebuttal.
I'm sorry, into a rebuttal by the applicant.
Yes, thank you. And my rebuttal is going to kind of, a couple of things to cover real quickly that were brought up by those who spoke in opposition. I think their primary concern is with a commercial scale loading dock, which is something that they've been living with since Tractor Supply has been open. So a commercial scale loading dock is faced away from the street. As it sits now, there's really not much in the way of a buffer between those rear yards and that loading dock. And so they are hearing larger vehicles, they are hearing forklifts. Nothing about this site is going to match that. In fact, I think the presence of the buildings that are proposed here between that loading dock and those residents will actually serve to buffer some of that noise over time. So, as was mentioned, I think in our explanation of the site plan, but I'll just bring it up again. These buildings are, the activity that is going to occur here really is on the front side of the building. While there may be access to the rear because there's a condensing unit back there, there are condensing units behind residences as well, and these condensing units are only going to need to heat or cool 1,250 square feet, so they're pretty small. But the front door and the garage door are facing the parking lot. They're not facing the homes. In addition, I just spoke with Troy about adding some landscaping. If you look at the plan, this is a landscape area, and we would be willing to put in some evergreen plantings within that landscape area to further buffer any activity that's occurring in that at that end of the building. Okay? But as I said before, for the most part, these buildings are for small businesses. The activity is occurring on the front side of the building, not the rear of the building. And it really is of a completely different nature than what you have at a larger operation like Tractor Supply, where you do have the 53-foot trucks coming in, you do have forklifts, and you do have, constant deliveries. Here, most likely somebody's going to show up, get in their vehicle, load up whatever supplies they need for their day's work, and leave and then come back later in the day. But so as far as the impacts that were mentioned, I think they're just of a different nature than what this plan really shows. The other thing to mention, while it is true that somebody's going to look out of the back of their home and see a building, just the existence of a building on the other side of an 8-foot fence and on the other side of a 25-foot landscape area really isn't a nuisance, and it shouldn't be considered a nuisance. As I mentioned before, there are other uses permitted by right within the C3 zone that could have more traffic impacts, more noise impacts than the proposed use. So while I understand the neighbor's concerns, and I think that being concerned about noise and being concerned about drainage are certainly valid concerns, I think that what we're proposing is just of a different nature than what they've experienced so far, and don't think that the impacts will rise to the level of concern that's been expressed today. That's my rebuttal. I don't know if we should move into final statements or if you do that from the opposition first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to afford those in opposition an opportunity for a rebuttal. If you may wish to do that, come forward. Go ahead, sir.
The only thing I really want to address is the idea that the nuisance in question is going to be different in kind from the one we experienced today. I understand that there will not be access to 18-wheel pickup trucks, but I'm still not convinced that the nuisance is going to be that different. Again, the loading and unloading of equipment, the metal-on-metal impacts, metal on asphalt, the use of metal access doors into these warehouse facilities, even your standard F-350 pickup truck is a nuisance when it's operated that close to a residential space, and certainly when it's operated at late or early hours. And part of the problem we have here is the applicant's lack of concrete understanding about how this facility is going to be used. You hear a lot of, well, most likely it'll be at 7 in the morning, most likely it'll be concluded at 6 in the evening. But essential to this application or to this use of the land is the idea that the tenants will have free access. So if they decide that today the day's start is 4 a.m., they will be permitted to do that. If they have a job out of town and they're returning at midnight to unload heavy equipment or back their large vehicle into the facility, they will be permitted to do that. So, you know, I don't want it to be believed that the only nuisance generated by Tractor Supply is 18-wheel pickup trucks and forklifts. It is a lot more than that, and that same type of activity will occur at this facility with completely unfettered access, which is really an escalation of the nuisance that we deal with Tractor Supply today. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir, if you could come forward.
I would go along with Derek on his speech and everything. But I just consider that the people here don't have any concrete way they're going. They just don't, like hours of operation, gates, or nothing else to, protect us. In other words, they live in Louisville, so they don't care about what happens out here. It's just, we're going to make some money out of it. That's what it occurs to. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So now we move into the final statements by the applicant.
Well, I think the opposition is first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Final statement by the opposition, then final statement on the,
Gotcha.
so final statement.
I'll afford you again the opportunity to make a final statement for your opposition, should there be any.
I'll decline. Thank you.
Opposition declines at this time. The applicant is now afforded that same pleasure of the final statement.
Thank you. So only one of the three of us actually lives in Louisville. and that's me. Troy lives in Crestwood. Phil lives out in L'Esprit. So they certainly are concerned. I am concerned as well because, you know, I'm here representing this case, and I think that this case is a good one and worthy of your approval of the conditional use permit. So when you're looking at, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to just say it again, if you looked at the permitted uses by right in the C3 zone, and you listen to those in opposition and their concerns about noise, those permitted uses could include lumber storage, millwork, and sales with nothing. I mean, they would have to abide by the landscape buffer requirements, which means they would put up a 6-foot fence. But there would be no requirement that any particular size vehicle comes back here. There's no design that says, well, you have to put a building up adjacent to the residential use area. So, you know, I would ask you all to look at the design, which I think has been really composed by Troy and Phil, to be sensitive to the properties that are around them. And this property it's a little unusual in the sense that it is the very back piece of this previously approved commercial development. And so it has to live with its commercial neighbor, which is the Tractor Supply loading dock and loading area, as well as its residential neighbors. And so when you look at the design and you consider that the activity really is pointed up and away from the residential neighbors, I think that's a good thing, and that's a thing that you might not get with another use. When you listen to Phil's testimony about drainage, this site is designed to drain everything into the existing commercial system, meaning no impact to the adjoining residential owners. I think that is, you know, part of the design that is worthy of consideration. And then I think as well, the idea of providing an opportunity for small businesses in this community to have a location that is close to transportation infrastructure, that is, you know, like I said, relatively small units, is a good thing for the community overall. So with that, I think that the comprehensive plan supports this application. It supports the waiver that we are asking for, which again is on the opposite side of the site from the nearest residences. We have agreed to augmenting the landscape buffering by using an 8-foot fence. I think we've agreed to a construction schedule or a construction time limits. So I would say with that, this proposal is, again, worthy of a positive vote. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. All right. So now we move into a time of discussion amongst the board themselves, your
Right.
thoughts.
Yeah, that would close the public hearing portion of it and move into discussion. But can
We
get
do like
those
to
handouts
close the public hearing part.
Rest of,
And actually,
thanks.
before we close the public
Oh, yeah.
hearing portion, and the only thing I'm going to ask is for the applicant to listen to what I've heard in testimony that could be conditions of approval if you were to choose to approve this. A standard condition of approval is that the conditional use permit approval only applies to the plan reviewed at the August 21st, 2023 Grange Board of Adjustments public hearing. The second one is a landscape and lighting plan shall be approved prior to the issuance of construction permit. And then again, these I've actually heard during the testimony. And an 8-foot fence shall be constructed along the Cherry Creek property boundary. The hours of construction are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., except for the concrete pads. I heard earlier the applicant testify that the hours of operation, once this is all built, is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then I've added one that if you are going to put any light poles in the property, that they be a maximum of 12 feet high. I don't believe they need to be any higher to efficiently light the parking lot, so there's no additional glare. Now, that's not from testimony, that's me adding that one in. So usually you, during if, again, we make a list of conditions of approval, the applicant would either agree or we talk about these conditions.
So I think we can agree to the conditions with the exception of that the hours of operation will be limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Well, your client testified, I wrote it down based on him saying,
He said generally the hours would be 7 to 6, but that people would have 24-hour access to their sites, to their suites.
well, the hours are then kind of useless if they can come in anytime. The neighbors were talking about this.
I recognize that the neighbors were talking about it.
Okay.
And I think we should also recognize that the people who lease these suites and operate here are going to be operating the way most people operate most days. Okay? So while they do have 24-hour access most of the time, and this was Troy's testimony, they'll be there between 7 and 6 because that's when most people are at work.
Well, I'll give you a little just advice on how you proceed at this point. At this point, the next step would be for somebody to make a motion to approve or to deny. And on this most recent handout are the statutory KRS guidelines for whether to make a motion to approve or to deny. And the motion to approve a conditional use has to be because it is found, you all find that it is essential or desirable to the community and not in conflict with the elements and objectives of the comprehensive plan. And then the statute gives you the six various factors to help you decide whether you feel like make a finding that this application or this use is essential or desirable. The first one is it will allow for the proper integration into the community of a use. Second is the character and objectives of the use and the potential impacts are appropriate. The third is that the community or neighborhood has a need for the potential and that there are potential benefits to the community for this use. Number three, the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding land uses and the general character of the neighborhood. And then it lists various factors such as height, which is 18 feet, bulk, scale, intensity, traffic, noise, odor, drainage, dust, lighting, and appearance. The fifth factor is that the proposed use will not impair the integrity and character of a zone. And the sixth factor is there are adequate public facilities, sewage, transportation, roads, all that. And then that would be if somebody wanted to make a motion to approve it, and then you would have a discussion and a vote. Or someone could make a motion to deny the conditional use because they believe that the proposed use is not essential or not desirable to the community, or that it is in conflict with the comprehensive plan. So, and that's just on the first one. And then the second one
Go
would be
through
the
the
variance.
landscape buffer and encroachment and
Right.
everything else. All righty. Then I would like to move forward. Ooh. I would like to move forward then with a statement of, we need a motion to provide an approval for a conditional approval or denial for a conditional use permit. And I will accept those motions at this time.
Take your time on
I will move in favor of the conditional use permit.
But Beach just went over the fact you have to look at what's just was handed out, and you've got to start saying some of those things. You can't just,
All of the things under conditional use.
What?
Give your reasons.
give your reasons. Look at the sample motion, and you have to give your reasons as Beach laid out.
In there on that first page, you'll have a blue mark that says conditional use permit, and it lists down there motions and how to go through that.
Test, yes.
Why don't you withdraw, you started a motion, withdraw it for a moment, and that would allow anybody else an opportunity while you're thinking. And
I will withdraw my motion.
Great, and not that you shouldn't be thinking still, but,
Can I make a motion to approve? Granting the conditional use permit will allow the proper integration into the community, a use specifically named in the zoning regulation.
So I have a motion to approve. And now I need a second on that motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
is that an adequate motion?
Mr. Early?
I couldn't quite hear everything he said. He said motion to approve based on it being
Proper-
essential or denied?
Essential.
No, he just went with one, the proper integration.
I think it needs one more.
No, it says one or more.
Yeah, one or more.
So, but it's based on the premise that it's essential or desirable
Oh, I see.
because it's proper integration into the community. Okay? Well,
All right. It's determined that that motion was
So-
acceptable, is that correct?
The thing I forgot, though, is that there are conditions of approval along with that. So I'll read what we have, and then you can just, if you agree with them, just put them into your motion. So the first is that the conditional use permit approval shall only apply to the plan reviewed at the August 21st, 2023 LaGrange Board of Adjustments public hearing. The second is a landscape and lighting plan shall be approved prior to the issuance of a construction permit. Then I added, and the applicant has agreed to these, an 8-foot fence shall be constructed along the Cherry Creek property boundary. Another one is that the hours of construction operation shall be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. with the exception of during the concrete pad installation. And then if any, in the lighting plan, if any poles are used, the maximum height shall be 12 feet. And unless you've heard any others or want to add anything, those are what I'd recommend that you consider as part of your approval motion.
Whatever you stated is just fine. Just some of that normally comes when you submit your construction plans for permits and all that, and that's where you can get down to the fine tooth. But as far as approving this project, you can add that to it now, to my motion.
Okay. So those conditions are also placed on it, and then whoever made the second, you agree?
Al Early
I
made the
agree.
second.
I agree.
All right.
Appropriate?
Yeah.
Adequate?
So we have a motion and a second at this time. The motion is to approve. If we can vote on that, all in favor of approving the conditional use permit.
Wait, you have to have discussion now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have, this is the discussion. and then-
Discussion motion.
And then there's actually a motion to call for a vote.
Okay. I apologize, I retract that portion.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
we will discuss all the points that were brought up about the conditional use permit, the whole motion itself.
Which includes the conditions of approval.
Yes. The aforementioned items about the 8-foot fence, about the work hours of 7A to 6P, with the exception of the 2 days or so for pouring the concrete pads, is the limit of 12 foot on the light poles out in the parking area, I believe.
If there are any.
If there are any. And then, does that come in, there was a mention of evergreens in the buffer area also. Does that come in under this or another section?
No, we're not, buffer areas after this.
Afterwards, okay, all right. So we have those, would anybody like to discuss those? Mr. Pierce or Mr. Early? Anybody else?
Actually, what you're doing two things. You're making findings of fact, and then based on that, you're making conclusions of law. Okay, so the finding of fact, the essential finding of fact that you're making is that this application is essential or desirable. And then the second is, if so, then to substantiate your findings, these are the various factors that you could check off as to findings. I mean, other people can add what they believe to be additional findings there if they wish. And then the vote is a conclusion of law, that you believe that it's consistent with the plan of comprehensive plan.
So I believe in that motion, it was mentioned to, number one, the conditional, granting a conditional use permit will allow proper integration into the community use. That was part of the motion.
Uh-huh.
All righty, so we've done that portion. There's been no further comment about it. It's time for the vote now.
Well, nobody said anything yet.
Right.
I mean, if they want to discuss it, this is the time for
Right.
everybody
Yeah,
to
I've
say.
asked
I mean,
if
only
anybody-
2 people have said anything so far, so.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Is it essential or desirable to the
Turn on your
community?
mic, is your microphone on?
Is it, you know, the move to approve would be based on the fact that it's essential or desirable to the community and not in conflict with elements or objectives, policies, et cetera. You know, just look back at the C3 zoning, it was a variance to allow, you know, C3 zoning does not allow extensive warehousing activity, and this is extensive warehousing activity. So from that point of view, is it, you know, they've proven their case that, you know, it's essential or desirable to the community, given that the community's spoken that they don't particularly think it's desirable, at least on that point of view. So that's what's swimming in my head at the moment.
Last minute comments, discussion.
I
Mr. Early.
appreciate the residents' concern about the construction. If I lived on their street, I would probably try to stop this as well. The plot of land that is zoned for C3, it's a lot nicer, empty, without anything going on there. But it is zoned for C3. And I think that the applicant has made a very nice design and has done everything he can to make it a part of that area that it is my hope he'll be responsive to the neighbors as he has been already today with the 8-foot privacy fence. If they have concerns, that they'll be able to share those with Troy, and they can review things like the 24-hour access without a gate or those kinds of things. But given where we are today and the things that have been stated today, I would vote in favor of this and see this as something that would be a positive addition to our community, the businessmen that do small business in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Early. So we've had some discussion now, and we have had a motion and a second on that motion. I believe this is the point in time where we actually vote to approve or deny that motion. So with that, I'd like to say, all those in favor of approving said motion, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
Nay.
There being none, oh, there was one, I'm sorry. There was one opposition. There was 3 approvals. So the motion carries and is approved. The next thing that we have would be the landscape buffer and encroachment variance. The minimum size on this, you've already been shown, is 15 feet due to needing at that very end lot number, I can't remember which one it was, but they had shown it on the map. They're needing additional area to back up. I think it's down here by Suite 18, bottom left-hand corner by numeral 1. They're needing a 7.5-foot waiver request to make that meet the encroachment. And I would like to have a discussion on that or a motion to approve or deny the waiver request of 7.5 feet.
And it's just limited to that 32-foot piece?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As was shown on the plan.
I'll make a motion, we approve the encroachment variance from 15 feet to 7.5 feet, only in the specific area that is shown on the plans that were presented today. And we'll do that under strict compliance with regulations, would create an undue hardship because of exceptional unique topography or natural or man-made conditions of the property which are submitted today.
We have a motion by Mr. Morgan. I need a second on that same motion. Could I have a second?
I second that motion.
Mr. Early seconds that motion. Time for any discussions about it at this time. Any thoughts? There being none, I believe everybody understands everything about the waiver request. So with a motion and a second, it's time to vote on that. I would say all in favor of a 7.5-foot waiver request, please say aye.
Aye.
I believe we have all ayes on that.
You didn't say anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. Me too. I was listening. Yes, I was an aye on that as well. So, all righty, both motions passed. And do we have minutes? Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you coming. We have some minutes to go over from our last meeting. No, thank you. This would be the minutes from a meeting on Monday, December 5th, 2022. If you could look those over real quick. Do we have any corrections on the minutes? Then I need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion to approve.
I have a motion. I now need a second to,
You'll have to second. You'll have
Oh.
to second because the other two members.
oh, that's right, they
on the
can't
board at the
vote.
time.
Right, okay. Then I will second the motion. And all in favor?
Everybody can vote, trusting that the two members that were here, or who are making the motion in a second, and the staff producing the record, so. All those in favor?
That's okay. All those in favor, say by aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. Anybody opposed? Motion approved. Motion carries for the minutes. I did have one comment to make on,
Well, let's close the meeting
Okay,
first,
yeah.
unless it's part of business. Part of business?
yes, yeah. It was just one thing, and I meant to mention it, if it should be corrected, maybe in the minutes next time. In the opposition letter, the gentleman had two incorrect addresses in there that he mentions. The actual address of this is 25, what is it? 2004 and 2005. He had down 2,400 and 2,500. So I just,
Minor.
He probably should have
minor,
caught that.
yeah, just minor thing. I didn't notice it till I'd read through it all. All right, the motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.